It was using an old norm of the internet in a way that was a little unfair now, right? And a little dangerous now. And it happened, we saw that happen with the robots text file before, right? Where it was meant for SEO crawlers and say ad crawlers, right, to look at the right things. And then it was like, okay, well, you could also just reuse this, and it's an honor system. And you just have to trust us that, as a tech company, we're gonna abide by it, right? And we know that that's not enough.
Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in the future. This week, I welcome back Toshit Panigrahi to the podcast. Toshit is one of the founders of TollBit, a startup that specializes in helping publishers monetize their content when AI bots come calling. As everyone knows, the AI internet is rising fast. People are using chatbots to search the web, and those chatbots are giving them answers, not links. And if there was any doubt that this was just a fad or not very impactful, TollBit's latest data, found in its State of the Bots report for Q1 2025, has put that notion to rest. The TLDR, AI scraping is way up, and it's very quickly becoming comparable to scraping from search engines like Google or Bing. That's one of several eye-opening, and in some cases worrisome, data points in the report. And Toshit and I dive deep into the most important ones. I'm especially interested in the fact that AI companies are now starting to openly ignore the long-standing internet standard of robots.txt, effectively giving themselves permission to crawl any publicly available content with impunity. What happens if this trend is left unchecked? And what can publishers do about it? We get into all the juicy details and their implications. If you're stressed about what agents are going to mean for the media ecosystem, you definitely don't want to miss this one. I hope you find the conversation as helpful as I did, and if you do, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or colleague. I'd also be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. Oh, and two more quick notes. One, I'm offering a monthly class on AI for beginners. It's only 60 minutes, and like everything I do, it's focused on practical takeaways for media professionals, people in journalism, PR, or communications. And it's only $49. Each one's a live class, so it's always up to date, and I guarantee you'll walk away with something you can apply in your day-to-day. You can sign up at mediacopilot.ai. Also, for deeper, more comprehensive training, I'm offering 2 extended courses in the fall. Each one lasts 6 weeks, and one is for journalists, and the other is for PR and comms. Now, these are loaded with lessons on things like deep research, how to automate workflows, and even building your own AI agent. There's tons of live workshopping, plus you get to do a project that's personalized for you, so you're guaranteed to upgrade the way you work. You can sign up for those courses at, where else? mediacopilot.ai. Okay. Now on with the show and my conversation with Toshit Panigrahi of TollBit. Toshit, welcome back to the Media Copilot.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. And by the way, congratulations. The Media Copilot, since the last time I was here, has blown up.
Oh, well, I like to think so. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. We've been trying to do a bit more, and we are. So it's good times, and so are you guys. And I'd love to talk a little bit about everything you guys are doing. So honestly, I'm really glad you're here. It's been too long. We're way overdue for a catch up. It's been like a year or something like that. And this is well timed. You guys obviously just published the TollBit State of the Bots report for Q1 2025, sort of looking at AI bot activity on the internet and all the trends. And there's some really kind of worrisome ones that I definitely want to get into with you. But first, I'd really like it if you just sort of set the stage a little bit right now. Like, what is sort of this moment in time in terms of AI and the media and publishers' relationship with it? I feel like it took a while, but we're now at a point where I think publishers and media companies have fully woken up to what AI represents and what that means for their business models going forward. And there's still kind of a mad rush to figure out like the next thing, the next part of that equation, right? And that's sort of where the state where we're at now. I'm sure you're getting more calls than you did 6 months ago or a year ago. And so, but just tell me, like, what's your sense of where publishers are at with AI as the industry sort of waking up to this bot scraping internet, like, and they're taking it seriously. What is sort of the conversation that you're having right now with just the industry broadly?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I think, um, one of the craziest things, and people don't believe us when we say this, the deck that we use with publishers has not changed except for design language update since November 2023. And
Mm.
so it gives us an interesting insight, right, where we can use that same deck, right, and see and it gives us a gut check. It gives us feedback about where the industry is. What are the pieces that cause hiccups? What are people understanding? And it's been interesting to see since say November, December 2023 to now, right? Uh, Folks know what training is, right? They, in the beginning, they were like, this TollBit thing is weird. I'm going to go sue. I'm going to go do a deal, right? And this is this weird fringe idea. What are you talking about? AI bots and micropayments? It's scary, right? And now I think, folks understand the difference of all those stages, and I think they're way more receptive to this idea. And I'm looking at it this way, right? As uh, hey, there's going to be right a and I don't think there has, in my memory at least, like a recent conversation with a publisher where there's been any pushback on this, where we
Mm.
tell them, look, there is a new visitor emerging. It's an AI visitor. This is a visitor who doesn't show up in your Google Analytics. This is a visitor who you cannot show an ad to. This is a visitor who cannot subscribe. And yet it costs you money when that visitor shows up, right? Because your CDN
Mm.
bill goes up, right? You have to figure out what a new value exchange with that visitor is, right? And they will be just as, maybe even more important than your human visitor. And that, I think every single publisher understands that now that I've talked to.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I want to get into that a little later in terms of what is that value exchange, but I really want to like get right to the report because there are some things I really want to pick apart with you. You know, like yourself, I like to get in the weeds on some of this.
Yeah.
This won't be too weedy because I think there's the numbers that you guys have shown are just so stark that it's almost the takeaways are almost obvious. But I want to get into some of them. So one of them, like just starting off right off the bat, like publishers, and it sort of supports what I was saying, and that everyone's kind of waking up. They're trying to block anyway 4 times as many bots over year,
Mm-hmm.
which is I think mostly by adding things to robots.txt, which is of course the file every site has that sort of is supposed to tell crawlers what to do. And there's also this idea that well, we'll get into the details of it, but like basically not idea. I mean, you guys are showing that the publisher, the AI companies or the bots are kind of ignoring this in not entirely, but in more and more ways. So just sort of like on robots.txt generally, like it was always kind of an honor system, didn't really have teeth, not enforceable. Like where does it fit now in a publisher strategy? Like, how should even people think about that?
I think one of the first, it's a remnant of a different time of the internet, right? It was a
Mm.
time when a webmaster could say, hey, like, and it was very important in the days of SEO, right? To let bots know, like Googlebot and Bingbot know what pages should you look at, what pages should you not look at, and even to keep the search engines um, above board, right? Because you don't want a crawler to accidentally index, your private message page or my private message page, right? So it was a good way of letting even the crawlers know what should you be looking at, what is off limits, right? And if you were a good actor, right, you could be. It was an honor system, right? You
Mm.
could be trusted to follow that, right? And I think in the beginning, everyone looked to that as the first place to say, well, this is kind of like the crawling that was being done in the past. Let's use that same sort of paradigm to block it. And I think it wasn't just us, but I think a few other other reports as well found that wasn't really enough to keep a lot of the AI bots out, right? And so we start, and when publishers onboard, right, to TollBit, that's one of the first things they see, and I think it's natural for them and I think you touched on this, right? Like that robots.txt file is ever growing. There's new bots
Mm-hmm.
that people are adding year over year that are emerging, right? And those are only the ones that we know about. Think about all the agents that we don't know about yet, right?
Right.
Who don't identify themselves.
Yeah, totally. Like I feel like there's all these sort of extra, like we focus a lot on the main companies like OpenAI and Claude and Perplexity and all that, but there's like all these other bots. Some of them are in your report. I'm sure some of them aren't. And the like, I guess maybe give me a sense of like what even that environment looks like in terms of like we all think of like the 4 or 5 AI companies that we know about, but is there like how many are there, like what how long is this list, and how many different companies are sort of crawling the internet to either train AIs or just get information? What's the sense of the scale of this?
Certainly. At the moment, I think we track about between 25 to 30 of them, right?
Okay.
So in the beginning, when I think folks started first identifying themselves, right? And it's interesting to see, you can go back in the forums, in middle of 2023, right? And I think people were copy pasting this block. It's on Medium. It's on a few other places, right? They were blogging about, hey, as a webmaster, if you want to opt out of AI training, put this disallowed, GPT bot on your site, right? Obviously, this was after the fact, right? The content had, but
Right.
maybe been already trained on, right? And that list. Can't say with certainty. Obviously, we're in no position to know directly.
Right.
But it was. I think the key point was it was after the fact, right? No one asked for permission ahead of time, right?
Sure.
No one argues about that. And I think since that time, we've seen the sort of evolution of first it was the AI crawlers, right, and then you had companies. Through the course of 2024, we saw the rise of Silicon Valley investors call it the wrapper application, right? You take a model, you're not training because it's actually an expensive thing, right, to do.
Of course.
And you build an application, you package it in a different way, and you go to your secret sauces go to market, right? And so there's no training involved. You take some off-the-shelf models, repackage them, and now those in 2024 we saw those wrapper applications identify sometimes their user agents as they were going out to rag on internet content, retrieve on internet content, right? So we started seeing the rise of this new class. OpenAI also released their other user agent that was for RAG purposes. So we started seeing sort of the evolution of what kinds of agents were being added.
Okay. So I'd love to zero in on one particular finding of the report. And it has to do with robots.txt and the ignoring of it or getting around it. So apparently now that we have a rise in what you identify as user agents. So I think it's important to kind of like clarify what those are. So you have, I guess I would say it seems like broadly 3 different kinds of AI crawlers, right? There's the training crawler. There's a search index crawler that's kind of like, Google going out and just looking at the internet to see what's out there so it can quickly retrieve content. And then there's this relatively new in terms of scale, I guess, of the user agent. This is something that goes out in response to a query directly. So a person's actually asking about a topic on whatever it is. Maybe it's drink recipes, and this thing goes out to crawl the sites that have the drink recipes so it can give it an AI summary or whatever. And so apparently, according to, actually, it's not just according to your report, because you cite directly into the terms of service of some of these bots, Google and Perplexity, and I think there was one other that you said, Meta, right? That was it. And they've basically given themselves permission to ignore robots.txt for that particular bot, for the user agent, saying this, well, this is just like human traffic. That just seems really worrisome to me. and I know that robots.txt, like we just said, kind of gets ignored anyway, but to brazenly sort of take this stance signals sort of something deeper, I feel like, that is really notable. I don't know, what is your, first of all, have I accurately kind of summarized that? Secondly, what is your overall take on that specific change? Because it seems like, although it's kind of a little change in a sense, because it's one of three things, and it seems like it's really, really relevant.
It's absolutely relevant, and I think you captured it exactly right. Right, it's baked into the terms of service, and they're saying, well, this is just like a browser acting on your behalf or user or agent acting on your behalf, so we should be allowed to just bypass it right now, right? I think there's two, things to be just wary about, right? To be fair, right? Some agents in the past, even before GPT technology, right, LLMs, did say in their terms of service that, well, we're going to bypass robots.txt, and it was largely functional things, right? Like you send a message, say in Messenger, right? Facebook will use a specific user agent to fetch information about the title of the link you send, the image of the link you send. And in that case, they're like, look, we're going to bypass it because it's just better for the user experience, right? We can show you an image in the message, right? That has existed, right? I think this was another instance, right? And the reason we called it out specifically was it was using an old norm of the internet in a way that was a little unfair now. Right? And a little dangerous now. And we saw that happen with the robots text file before, right? Where it was meant for SEO crawlers and say ad crawlers, right, to look at the right things. And then it was like, okay, well, you could also just reuse this, and it's an honor system. And you just have to trust us that, as a tech company, we're gonna abide by it, right? And we know that that's not enough. We know next step of TollBit for a lot of publishers, start enforcing that, right? To make sure that the content that you shouldn't be read stays off limits, right? And now we're seeing a similar thing again, where it's taking something that seemed innocuous in the past and it's sort of borrowing, right? It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's just borrowing that same innocuous standard that, oh, well, we used to also kind of do this before, so we're also going to continue to kind of do this today, right? So I think that's the first dangerous thing that of passing it off as the same thing.
Right.
And the second part about that is also a little dangerous because it also does, in some ways, right? Like this isn't just for, say, UX benefits, perhaps, right? Now, in the past, if you look at the rhetoric, right, to say, well, if you don't want us looking at your content, put it in your robots text. We're going to abide by it, right? To then saying, oh, well, then the industry found out, wait a second, you're not following that, right? Well, that's okay. We're going to send you lots of traffic, right? Then we found out, well, actually, those click-through rates and referrals are low, right? Now to then openly evolve that and say, well, I know you had the robots text file, but we're going to ignore it anyways, right? It's this weird slippery slope of where does this stop?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point of the slippery slope, I feel like there's and what we said earlier about a different moment now than before. Because when you were describing not having asked permission to get data to train, I do have at least a little bit of sympathy there, in that there was a paradigm of the web of like, oh, there's all this crawled data and it sort of was accepted. You could kind of do what you want with it, as long as you weren't sort of replicating things wholesale, right? Like deliberately violating copyright. So I can kind of see like, there was even some education needed on the part of the AI companies. They needed to sort of figure like, oh, we're actually substituting products. Well, now it's 2025, it's June 2025, and we know better, right? And to do it now, to take some sort of stance of like, oh, we're going to take an old standard and apply it now to the AI world, now that we have the benefit of the last 2 years of knowing what upheaval this could create, just seems really disingenuous. Like it just seems like now you're just deliberately doing this for this deliberate commercial bypass of something, as opposed to we're just kind of experimenting and seeing what we're trying to do here. So I don't know if that's a legal argument, but to me, it just feels different, right? It feels like we've passed a point where, come on, we all know what you're doing, and you know what you're doing. Right. Anyway, that's sort of my stance on it. I don't know if you want to respond to that, or if it's just like my moment's rant.
I don't know if there's anything more I could add to that. I think that was well articulated.
So So by doing this, I mean, I guess we could project forward a little bit, right? Like there's an agent internet that's emerging, and there's user agents, and that's increasingly just going to be a way people get information online. Um, Considering everyone's predicted that, like if this sort of new philosophical stance takes hold, and then everyone sort of has this permission to sort of do human traffic versus is now like bot traffic's the equivalent. I feel like it's going to force everyone to think, well, like bots don't do what humans do, right? Like if they go to a website, a human can be enticed by a banner ad or even like a click or maybe convinced to do a subscription and all of these other things. This to me feels like the equivalent of a robot going to pick up your groceries, which we kind of do now, but it is like you wouldn't do if that was the entire economy in grocery stores, you wouldn't have like end cap displays. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't have a lot of sort of these secondary revenue generation things that the store depends on. And I feel like, we're rapidly heading into this world where it's all robots and no one's figured out quite what that, and to the point that you made earlier, like what is the new value exchange? And I know you guys are sort of offering that, but well, I have more thoughts on that, but like,
Yeah.
what to you is the like, how are we going to architect this value exchange? How does that work?
This will continue to evolve, right? There are tools, I think, as we try really hard, right, to think from first principles about how you design a resilient market around this, right? Because this will continue to evolve. No one has all the answers, right? I think one of in the report, one of the figures that we led with, right? It was figure 1.1 for a reason, was using the cover art for a reason, was this rise of, exactly to your point, that agent, right? The fact that if you look at the trend lines for crawling for indexing and crawling for training, they're relatively straight lines. And then you have this new line that is curving upwards, and it's almost, the start of an exponential curve, right? And it goes back to, remember when I said we haven't changed the deck for TollBit since we started talking to publishers, right? It was hard for them to see this in the data then. Now it's much clearer to them now, right? When we show them this and we say, wait, like, take a look at this for a second. Like, you've used the AI tools, right? And you're seeing that AI is reading, fetching far more efficiently than humans are, right? Content consumption is about to go up. It's about to explode, right? And I know that a lot of publishers are worried about, the decrease in subscriber counts, right? Month over month, or decrease in viewership, or maybe dropping CPM rates or ad revenue, right? But when they look at the TollBit dashboard, the one number they see going up and to the right is how many times it's being scraped. And then it's easier for them to understand that in the future, and it was important for us to shine light on this, that this is the recurring revenue stream here, right? We don't know all the answers yet, but what we do know, right, is that AI reads far more efficiently than humans. It consumes content far more efficiently than humans. And it's not hard to see now that a lot of that activity, a lot of the internet traffic itself in the future will be AI, right? And again, I said this earlier, right? This is a visitor that you cannot show an ad to, right? You cannot show, they will not subscribe. So in that scenario, how do you have a value exchange? And now you can start imagining, wait, it actually starts making sense that you can actually toll these visitors, right? Something, right? In order to get access to content data, because the users, the demand for news never went away. People are still asking and they're receiving it. Someone else is doing the reading for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, and obviously you guys offer a great solution there. Like you can redirect them, this bot traffic that is, to a kind of a paywalled site, and then they can choose to pay. But I also feel like they probably don't in many cases, and maybe they want to use just like a third-party scraper that you're not blocking, or I don't know, maybe it's not even being identified. Maybe they could find the same content just duplicated on another site. I don't know. There's other things I feel like that side of the internet might lean towards, which leads me to my question about sort of the legal and regulatory end of this, right? Like, there's obviously a lot of court cases ongoing about people suing AI companies over everything from training to RAG and all of it. We're waiting on some rulings there. There have been some, some have been interesting and somewhat definitive one way or the other. There's also just the regulatory side of it too, of there's all the solicitation the government did about copyright, and the AI companies are making their case, the publishers are making theirs. Are we all just waiting for something to happen, like some regulation or some court case to be decided? I know, this is a little bit myopic on the US, but it does tend to be kind of like the bellwether of what standards sort of get adopted. What is your sense? And it sort of speaks to what I sort of mentioned earlier about the market, right? Like for you guys, I could see publishers certainly being thrilled about the thing you offer, but then for that to be a real marketplace, the other side of the market also needs to participate. And I just feel like there might be not quite enough incentive until some of this stuff gets resolved. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Oof, there's a lot to unpack there, Pete. That was a meaty one.
Podcast, so we have time.
Let's start unpacking that a little, right? I think the first one, I think we'll come back to the participation of the other side in a second, right? And let's focus on the first part of that, right? Which is what do we do about regulation, right? Where does this lead, right? What happens when these bots try to bypass those cybersecurity tools, right? And let's start there, right? Okay. I think one of the things that we see already, right, is that when you block the bots, when you malign them, they just get better, right? They get better at evading those detections. We have seen enough demos on Twitter, right, or X, right, where these bots, agents, are able to solve CAPTCHAs. They pretend to browse like humans, right? And the other misconception on the other side is web scraping is not free, right? Web scraping actually costs money. It actually costs compute, right? That unsanctioned access, right? Because if you try to go and web scrape, right, in an unsophisticated manner, you're going to get blocked very quickly, right? By most of these cybersecurity tools. So what do? Right? You're going to use some scraping service. You're going to use residential IP addresses. You're going to use browser automation tools, right? There are ways to get around that, right? In order to go and scrape content, right? That actually drives up the price of scraping, right? And without a TollBit-like solution in place, right, it actually sets something dangerous starts happening, right? As we keep maligning the bots, if we don't find a productive solution here, right, we keep throwing more and more expensive cybersecurity tools at them to try to block them, right? The bots keep getting better. In order to detect those bots, right, those more sophisticated bots, the price of cybersecurity tools also increases. So you have this very bad negative feedback loop that happens here, right?
Arms race.
Right. It's an arms race, right? And unfortunately, the websites are left with this cost. The websites today are left with the cost of AI visitors, their human visitors, finding out who is a good visitor and who's not a bad visitor, because so much of the web, right, operates on an innocent until proven guilty model, right? The web's going to remain open. The web's going to, anyone can come visit a site, and the onus is on the website owner to deploy very expensive tooling to determine who is a bad actor, right? And this is dangerous and not sustainable, right? In a future where 90% of the internet traffic is actually just bots fetching information very efficiently on agentic actions, right? That has to be recalculated now, right? Now, the other thing I want to touch on is that's a negative outcome. That's what's at stake. And that's why it's unsustainable, right? Now, knowing that that's not a future that should be allowed to happen, let's think a little bit about the regulatory aspect of it. One of the thought experiments that we do, right, is if you wanted to effectively regulate this, right, and say, every government realized that, wait, actually, this is actually really unfair that website owners have to keep paying more and more, right, to even secure their content, as this continues to rise. If you wanted to effectively regulate this, yes, we need some determination, copyright, fair use in this AI in this AI world, right? However, a simple way to start could be to simply say, anonymous, lying about your user agent online is illegal, right? If your browser, identify as a browser. If you're Safari on your phone, fine, identify Safari. No one generally lies about those devices. Don't lie, right?
Right.
But if you're an autonomous visitor, if you're a crawler, you're an indexer, you're a RAG agent, you have to identify yourself correctly. You cannot pass in Mozilla and Safari as a user agent and try to pass off as a human. That should be illegal.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a form of fraud, really. Just fundamentally.
And in that case, right, this is like the government saying, hey, piracy is illegal. $250,000 fine. All of us have seen that blue screen that was on DVDs, right? Back in the day, right? The government says piracy is legal. The government makes no market determination, right? I don't care if you mail the DVD, you stream the DVD, you buy the DVD, go watch it. I don't care, right? But you cannot pirate it. That's the equivalent of saying you cannot lie about your user agent online. This then shifts the locus of control back to the website.
That'd be important for sure. That's a good one. So I'd love to zero in on a couple of other parts of the report, and there's a cool stat that you guys have. I can't remember if you had it before, but it really jumped out at me. I think it's new. It's the scrape to referral ratio, and that is just how many times a specific bot's going to scrape your site, or maybe it's sort of the aggregate of bots from a particular actor like Perplexity, and versus how much traffic they actually give you. And some stats that you gave, like OpenAI's is like 179 to 1, Perplexity's is 369 to 1, Anthropic's is like 8,692 to 1. It's kind of nuts. And again, it all speaks to like the thing we knew, which again, you guys have contributed a lot of data towards, that, hey, AI scraping and summarization kills clicks. Like there's not really much click through. And this sort of emphasizes that. But I do kind of like the variety of the scale of it between services intrigued me, in that I was kind of unsure why OpenAI's would be 179 to 1 versus Claude versus Perplexity. You know what I mean? Like, why are certain services scraping a whole ton without sending anyone? You know what I mean? Like, I know no one's generally sending people, but it's like, why would it be such a disparate thing? Like, is it UI? Is it the different user behavior on these services? Again, I know maybe some of this isn't definitive, but you've definitely looked at this closer than I have. Why would Anthropic's be like close to 9,000 to 1 and OpenAI's be closer to like 200 to 1?
So there are going to be proprietary internal things that we can't glean from the outside, right? How often someone chooses to update their knowledge graphs and indices, how often they refresh caches, for example, right? Like we can't know that from the outside, right? What we can report on is the number, and then what we see from the outside as well, right? And it is interesting when you compare just on a cursory examination, right? Like a Claude UI versus Perplexity versus OpenAI's, right? The Search GPT in particular, right? I think there is a difference in the UI, right? And I think that there is some indication that certain UIs are better at sending people back or encouraging clicks than others, right? And I think it may come simply down to like in the Anthropic UI, it's not really inviting you to click out somewhere to go explore more.
I also kind of wonder sometimes if, again, this is pure speculation, but I'm trying to infer something, that maybe they're just bad at search, and they're doing something really inefficiently compared to Perplexity, which has been doing it for a while, or Google or whatever. But I think, to your point, I think UI makes a huge difference. It's just that I looking at the difference between OpenAI and Perplexity, which is, and they're comparable, right? They're like one's roughly double the other. I do feel like Perplexity's UI is probably the most friendly I've seen. This is just a gut from my feeling, like just because they put those little cards in every search and they appear prominently at the top. If it was solely UI, my guess would be that Perplexity would probably be the best for this, but I could be wrong. Just because OpenAI, that right rail, this is on desktop, obviously, but that right rail only opens up, if you engage with it, typically, unless you've sort of
Right.
deliberately done search. And I don't know. Again, they're the ones who know their user behavior, but just because I always focus on defaults as a default guy, I just feel like if it was just UI, Perplexity would be the winner. I don't know.
This also shows the delta here from Q4 to Q1 is also interesting, right? From Q4 to Q1, right? OpenAI's ratio improved. It's almost as if they made changes so that you would click out into something, right? Versus Perplexity, it actually got worse, right? Now, to your point, Pete, I don't know if it still is, but I believe Perplexity's tagline at some point was "skip the links," right? It could be that if you find, for example, Perplexity's UI very inviting, or they're good at getting you to dig deeper, it could be that this increase in engagement is simply that you actually stay longer to explore 2 or 3 more deep dives before you click out to a page, right? That perhaps OpenAI isn't doing in their UI.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of it, like, I know this probably predates when you were publishing these reports, but OpenAI made search an official feature sometime last fall, I think. And have you seen, like, in terms of the data that you've seen, like, how big a deal was that? Because I also feel like there's like the AI search market looks really different than it did 6 months to a year ago. Just people are just adding it as a feature. I mean, Claude most notably in I think it was in March. Like, what are some of the big inflection points in terms of just how AI has evolved and what has sort of moved the needle in terms of numbers as far as you've seen?
Certainly, I think the introduction of Search GPT, I think, took that more Anthropic-like UI and evolved it into a more Perplexity-like UI, probably to be, this is just me from the outside, probably to be more competitive, right? With that sort of interface, learning that people like to engage with that. And then I think the other one, there was a chart in the report, right, which is it's hard to understand, I think, just at first blush what this chart is really saying. But I think when you talk about inflection points, right, this chart is really insightful, and it compares its figure. It's the one that compares that AI bot scraping as a percentage of Googlebot and Bingbot activity.
Oh, yeah. That one's actually was hard to grok for me. We'll try to get this on the YouTube. So the message for my producer, let's see if we can get this chart up on the video. So if you guys are watching on Spotify or YouTube, congratulations. But yeah, break this down, because this one was a little hard to grok for me because it was, well, you tell me, it was like the proportion of bot traffic as opposed to, well, I can't even explain it. You go.
Yeah. So there's essentially 2 lines, right? And we'll start with Bing. And what we basically did was said, let's take the top 6 AI scrapers, the biggest AI scrapers we see, right? And let's compare their activity across the network to the activity that we see from Bingbot. Googlebot, Bingbot have been around for 20 plus years. Publishers have deep relationships with Microsoft. For decades because of MSN, right? And Microsoft and
those are just they're regular, like, search bots. I know they mix AI in now, so you can't. It's hard to parse it, but those bots have been around forever.
Yes, yeah. And Googlebot and Bingbot have been around for 25 years now, right? Yeah. I don't know how long Bingbot's been around, but a long time, right? And they were used for, exactly as you said in the past, for search indexing, right? So we compared the activity of the top AI bots to the activity that we see on the network for Bingbot. And one of the most striking thing that we see, right? And this is the line in red, right? So, in Q2 2024, AI bot scrapes compared to as a percentage of activity of the incidence of Bingbot was around 11%. That grew in Q3 to 17%, in Q4 to 42%, and then Q1 to 60%. So the top 6 AI bots are crawling at almost 60% the level of Bing, right? Bing has been crawling the internet for 20 years. These AI bots have only been around for a fraction of that, right? Now, when you compare to Google, in Q2 last year, it was 10%. Then it grew to 17% of Google's activity, then 21, and then about 31%, right? What this is telling us... Sorry.
No, I was just, and most of that increase, as you've just articulated a few minutes ago, is probably RAG, right? Because that's the curve that's
Yes,
going up and to the right. This isn't training
yes.
per se, because those are pretty flat. So there's just so much RAG going on. Anyway, which is to say, search, AI search. Go on.
Exactly. So a lot of that increase, as you said, from the AI bots is from RAG, and we know this now.
Yeah.
Now we know. Let's look at these two diverging lines for a second, right? We know Googlebot and Bingbot both mix search plus AI, and Google has also been rolling out, right, the search generative experience. I'm not sure what they call that now. Now there's also AI mode, right?
Right.
It's interesting to see that the top AI bots compared to Google doesn't grow so disproportionately as compared to Bing. And I think this shows the Google bot RAG activity that happens now. It's almost like the Google bot activity is growing with the rest of the AI bots as opposed to if it was just doing general search calling.
Oh, okay. I think I do see what you mean. Yeah, and it's also like I think it's even though it's hard to grok, it is one of the most revelatory charts in that I think it just shows like, oh, even though as you also show in the report, there's so little click through, like there's so little referral traffic from AI, but that really masks just how big a deal it is. You know what I mean? Like referral is absolutely not a good measure of just how much is going on. It's all this scraping, and it's massive. So that shows to me like also like beyond this the business consequence of it, like our information retrieval behavior is changing, right? Everyone is
Mm-hmm.
just like asking AI for stuff and it's going out and getting it for them. And that's just, it's significant and it's only going to keep growing, at least for a long time.
And then let's also think about in the context. I remember when we were talking just a little while ago about regulatory angles, right?
Mm-hmm.
If all of a sudden every single tech company had to be transparent about what their user agent was doing, now websites can decide what they want to allow, what they don't want to allow, what they charge. And can you imagine the second order effect of that? The onus would not be on websites anymore to pay for expensive cybersecurity tools anymore,
Mm-hmm.
because it would be illegal for you to misrepresent your user agent, right? Through very simple technology, a publisher, a website could decide who they want in and who they don't want in.
Hmm. Well, that'd be great. It'd be a shinier future. I'd love to just think a little bit more about the future. I'd like to end on hopefully something hopeful, but like for folks listening that might um, be a little unsure on what their next move is here, and want to sort of think about contingencies. Everyone sort of knows, yeah, like the AI activity is going to slowly take over. I just wrote something about not necessarily panicking over that, but it is like a thing that is definitely happening over the long term. But think about like what's sort of that shiny future that you kind of just described, but then the sort of what's sort of the bleaker future where it's maybe not as good because everyone's sort of fearing that side of things. Like what would be the things that happen that turn us into a place where content and media and journalism isn't nurtured. So it's kind of a downer note, but then maybe we could reflect it back.
Yeah, well, we can. It's good because it'll show us what's at stake,
Yeah.
and then it'll show us how we might be able to fix it, right? I
Yeah.
think what's at stake here is if this is left unchecked, right? If then what'll end up happening here, right, is the publishers, the websites are already getting we're there again. This is not just TollBit. There's enough even trade org and regulatory reports that are coming out now about the impact that AI summaries are having on
Mm-hmm.
referrals, on human visitors, on subscribers, right? Ultimately, and it frankly it means less revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Less folks come to the site, you generate less revenue. It's as simple as that, right? It doesn't matter if those users are higher intent. You're not able to charge more to your advertiser because it's a higher
Yeah.
intent user, right? It's
Exactly.
meaningless.
This is what everyone's
And
fearing.
so exactly. And so you have to protect. I think the open web is at stake then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything will go behind a paywall. Nothing will be
Yeah.
accessible to anyone, right? And it turns out, even in that world, then, right, that everything goes behind a paywall. You end up needing a TollBit solution there because
Mm-hmm.
you actually need to have a way for people to authenticate, identify themselves honestly, and then get access to that content, right? And I think it is unfortunate, and this is unfortunate because if we don't solve this faster, right, one of the things that we're very careful about is like we try to find a collaborative answer. What are the places, for example, right, where publishers can add value back? They're sitting on lots of data. How do we make that data available to AI companies, right? How do you personalize answers for one agent, right, based on their preferences, right, that a publisher might know, or you might have a subscription to, for example, to a website. We're already doing that with publishers, right? Can there be a standard by which the agent proves that you have a subscription to Wall Street Journal, right? These are collaborative solutions. This isn't maligning one side and saying, well, we're just going to block everyone here, right?
Yeah, I know.
Because that's the death spiral. Then your cybersecurity costs go up. The bot traffic continues to explode, right? Advertiser trust erodes. And you don't want to end up in that free fall.
Yeah. And you can't just convince humans not to do what they're going to do, which is to say, if AI is out there, it's available to them and it's convenient for them for certain things that they want to get information on, they're just going to do it, whether you participate or not.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, also, Pete, on that, I do want to end on that brighter note. I don't want it to be all bleak, right?
Yes, don't.
And I do think in that, right, like one of the reasons for this, and for the report, is to also shed that light on what the opportunity is, right?
Right.
If we reimagine the web just slightly, right, I think content consumption is about to explode. And I'll give you one small example. One of the highest rates, CPM rates, right, charged on a per access basis on TollBit is from a local journal, a local news site, because it's highly unique content. It's not replaceable content. You can't get it elsewhere, right? And it might not have a lot of volume, but when the person wants to know, is the school district closed today because of the snowstorm, they're the only ones who know, right? And so there we see, on the other side, instead of SEO hacking and putting out, a lot of content that's very similar, right? On the other side, I think we have a world where truly unique journalism, right? New content, local content, right? Hyper differentiated content actually demands a value, a premium, right? So it could reward, like it could get back to, a lot of publishers could get back to, instead of just optimizing, their SEO results, focusing on journalism, quality journalism. So that's the brighter note, right? That we at least look forward to.
Absolutely. It's something I've argued too, in that, like, I think AI, while, again, can be worrisome for journalists in some ways, or the media business, it's ultimately good for journalism, in that if deployed in the way that you just described, which is to say that, it's going to optimize for that unique voice, that the truth, that the rich human driven content, and I think it's going to be forced to, because that's what people want. That ultimately they don't want all the similar stuff. So I think there's going to be sort of natural forces that lead to that. I think it's just, one false move on this infrastructure side of things. But I know we're all trying to make sure it's steered in the right direction. Toshit, this has been great. I feel like we could have talked for another couple hours, but we're going to have to leave it somewhere. Thanks for saving us from not going in a completely dark black hole of internet despair. I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Toshit Panigrahi, CEO of TollBit. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you'd take just a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, PR professionals, and communicators. Seeing you in the future.